Hello, and thank you all for joining us on a very hot day, especially here in London, where, well, two of us are at least. So we're really excited to get chatting about exactly how you might go about finding your dream flexible role. Hopefully everyone can hear us. Just trying to get a check from the back end of our little webinar studio. Okay, amazing, we're in. So say hi in the chat if you're around, and it'd be great to hear from you. Any questions that you've got, pop them in the chat and we'll try to get to them. So I've got Jeff and Chris with me today to talk about this. They are both absolute experts in how you might land a flexible role. So Jeff, do you want to introduce yourself first?
Sure. Hello, everyone. I'm Jeff. I'm currently the head of talent at Motorway. I've been in the recruiting space for over 15 years now, mostly in the San Francisco Bay Area. I've worked at companies like Meta, Reddit, just some smaller ones like Medium and Lumosity. But I'm currently working on a team of 6 talent partners here at Motorway. And we are, if you're not familiar with us, the UK's fastest growing car marketplace for used cars. So yeah, I'm very happy to talk all things flexible hiring and career growth.
Awesome. And just so everyone understands, what is your kind of headline flexible policies? What do you do at Motorway?
Yeah, so we have a few things in terms of flexible hiring. We have a mandatory 1 day a week for most teams. And you kind of decide, or you make the agreement with your team on which day you come in. For example, marketing will come in on Wednesdays. We also, in my team, will come in Tuesdays and Thursdays. In terms of hours, I think it's quite flexible. Like myself, I have an 8-month-old at home, so on some days I might have to start a little bit later if I'm in charge of feeding the baby, and then I might make that up later in the night. But for the most part, we hire UK-based employees, and we have 1 day remote, 4 days remote and 1 day in office.
Awesome. Thank you. That's super helpful. And Chris, same questions to you. A little introduction and a little bit about the flexible working at Mott MacDonald.
Yes, so as Beth alluded to, I'm in Glasgow, so unfortunately it's not as hot up here, which is unfortunate. We haven't really had a summer so far, but fingers crossed that changes soon. I am the talent acquisition business partner here at Mott MacDonald. For those of you that don't know Mott MacDonald, we are a global engineering company. So we're an engineering consultancy. We have roughly 19,000 employees global, worldwide. In the UK, we have about 8,000 employees. The type of roles we do, as you can imagine, it's a lot of civil engineers, structural engineers. I myself specialise in mechanical and electrical engineers. We work on behalf of a lot of private clients and government contracts. So recently, off the top of my head, we've worked on designing HS2, the Elizabeth line. We do a lot of work with the government for new hospital builds. So that's usually what we kind of look for. Other than that, our flexible working policy is, as you can imagine, we're a massive company. We have an office in probably every major city. We have an office, I think, in about 150 countries at last count. So what we try and do is we try and have an agile approach. We don't have mandatory, you must be in the office, you must not be in the office, but we do work hybrid. So what we expect is a mixture of in the office to collaborate with your team and then also at home. And what we do is we look at a common sense approach. So it depends on what you're doing that day, what your team's doing that day, what your client is doing that day. And on top of that, we also have a flexible start, flexible finish time, just as long as you're kind of making up your core hours with us as well, just to facilitate that with everyone.
Yeah, amazing. And I forgot to introduce myself. I'm Beth, and I work at Flexa, which is the only place where you can find verified flexible companies like Motorway, like Mott MacDonald. So definitely, if you're looking for flexible jobs, go and check out all of the amazing companies on there. And as I've seen in the chat, everyone is here excited to get some advice about how they can find their next flexible job. So, and Chris, maybe you can kick us off with this first question. What are your very top tips to get for candidates to get them to stand out in front of, you must receive hundreds of CVs for roles.
Yeah, the type of roles we do, I'll try and be broad, but we obviously do a lot of engineering roles. And what I would say is be concise with your CV. What we do get is we happen to get a lot of CVs that are multiple pages long. They don't include things like your expertise, what you've done in the past, your achievements. What they usually have is your job title, your company, and a list of your responsibilities. I mean, it is the standard way to do your CV, but I do feel that does yourself a disservice. There's nothing wrong with putting in an opening paragraph explaining why you're applying for the job and also your skills, your background. One of the good things I would say on a volume recruitment like I do, some of our roles get 200 applications. It is quite a good thing. I know it's not always plausible, but it's quite a good thing if you look through the job description and if you see some keywords that actually match what you've done. For instance, myself, I would look for certain software experience. If you look through the keywords and you notice that there's software experience or this particular type of experience that you have and you've just forgot or you've not put it on your CV, I would 100% say put it in your CV. For myself, we don't use an automated system that scans your CV like some companies do. So we do scan it manually. But again, I think putting in those keywords that match up with that job description can help you get that perfect job, whether it be a manual person looking through it or an automated system looking through it. The reason I kind of say that is when I'm manually looking through, say, 200 CVs, what will happen is I'll see your CV and your CV will look good. But then the next 5 people might have that extra couple of keywords and you'll still be on the list, but you'll move down and down and down. And by the time I have my short list, you've moved down too far and you're not in the short list. Even though you may have been a perfectly good candidate, it's just the fact there's those certain aspects maybe missing on your CV. So I think from my point of view, that's definitely a standout point. And it's not something I like to say about having to include these specific keywords because I don't think it shows off a skill, but it is just sometimes when it's a very, very competitive market and it is, say, 100 CVs that's being screened through, you definitely do want to be having those keywords, having those sentences that match up with what the job description is looking for on that first hurdle before we interview you.
I think there's something really actionable in that. And first of all, it's great to hear that you're able to manually look through CVs. I know that there's a lot of people who get frustrated about candidate experience. So it's really great that you're able to give them that attention. But the thing that I take away from that is, your CV is going to be read by somebody, hopefully a human, who might be reading 200 other very, very similar CVs that same day. So anything that you can do to make their job easier by mimicking the language in the job description that they know they're looking for, it just helps you kind of jump out a little bit more front of mind. I think that's a really helpful tip.
I totally agree. There's definitely certain times where I will decline someone not even based on the fact their CV hasn't hit the mark, it's just they've been low down on the scoring based on other CVs, and I will email them and say, apologies, you've been declined because you don't have experience in such and such of this or such and such software, and they will reply and say, I actually have extensive experience in it, I just didn't put it in my CV, which is good. I'll have the conversation with them, but when you actually have 200 CVs in front of you, it's doing yourself a disservice.
Yeah, exactly. And Jeff, do you have similar experiences, similar tips, or anything different?
Yeah, I think I echo a lot of what Chris said, but I think the best tip I would want to give is to try to tailor your CV towards the job description, or have several different versions of your resume. So an example would be if you're applying for a position at a scrappy startup, for example, you might want to highlight the relevant skills where you're building a process from scratch, or you're engaging with different cross-functional stakeholders, versus if you are applying to a much larger organization that might be looking for a lot of performance management or something like that. So make sure you're highlighting the relevant skill sets for the role and for the company. That I think is usually the most helpful in making sure that you're keeping it concise, because I think it might hurt you if you try to put too much in there, because then you're creating more work for the recruiter to have to parse through on, a lot of text to find the relevant information.
Yeah, totally. And I think just staying on that point for a second, like the dream situation for both someone hiring and for a candidate is to be able to completely tailor their CV to each individual company, each individual application. But the job market's pretty hard at the moment, and I know that a lot of people are having to send out tens, if not hundreds, of applications to land a role. Would you say that if you've got those kind of basics, like startup versus corporate, or specific industries, that you could generalize them a bit more in that way?
Yeah, I think it's helpful to have different buckets, so you don't need to have one, like very specific ones for every company. But yeah, exactly what you said, just having like different versions of it, for a tech startup or a bigger company, or something in a different industry. I think and then if you sort of group those companies together, then you can decide which version of your resume to send out or CVs.
Yeah, definitely. I'm seeing a couple of questions coming into the chat around specific roles that we might have on Flexa, or indeed at Motorway or Mott MacDonald. The best thing that you can do is just go onto Flexa. You'll be able to find us via our LinkedIn page or our Instagram page and have a look. And yeah, we absolutely prioritize inclusivity and diversity. So the person I can't see your name, I'm sorry, the person who's saying that you're disabled and you need to work from home, we will absolutely have something on there for you. Definitely go and check that out. We'd love to help. So into our next question, what is the most common thing that candidates myth or forget about when they're writing a CV?
I'll take this first. So we've all seen a lot of the funny stories about it, but one of the first things I would say is make sure it's your CV you're attaching to your application. It's a very funny story, and I know you've seen the ones where people attach recipes, etc. But you would be extremely surprised at the amount of shopping lists I've received, photographs I've received, and it's one of those simple things that mistakes happen, but it's a funny story. But those are the things I would definitely say double check. On a more serious note, on Jeff's point there, what I would say is the CV that I see is missing. What happens a lot, I said, is, especially if it's a very congested market, is you get a lot of CVs in and they have a job title and job responsibilities, which is fine, but then they don't have a sector, such as a startup sector. They don't have a project. So what then happens, again, in my opinion, from engineering, we get a lot of roles in, or a lot of CVs in, that the roles maybe need. For instance, when we do the hospital builds, we need someone that has experience in engineering the design of a hospital, because it's a pretty important thing, and that is in the job description. And what we'll get is a lot of really good CVs. They'll have a job title saying an engineer, and then they'll have their responsibilities, but they won't allude to the fact that where they've worked. So have responsibilities as an engineer, but it won't say what sector, what projects. It won't say whether they've worked on a car park, a bridge, a building. And I've seen that as well. I've worked, sometimes I have to step in on other roles such as HR, and some of our HR roles need very specific, say, sector experience, whether that even be retail, corporate, engineering. And what will happen is we will get 5%, say, of CVs that actually hit the mark and say, I have this experience. And then we receive a large amount of CVs that may hit the mark and we may be missing something, but because we have that amount of CVs, it doesn't mention any sector experience. So they don't get disqualified, but they start moving down the list. And I feel like it's maybe unfair that then happens, but it's just the fact that the top 10% hit those marks when you have such a competitive market. And I think that's the thing people miss a lot, is they maybe put their job responsibilities in, but they don't mention, or maybe don't link it with the job description on the specific sector or project, which can make a real difference in how you score against other candidates.
Yeah, that's amazing, because this is exactly what we want, right? How do we get into that top 5% of applicants, be more likely to guarantee an interview, and then start moving through this process? Jeff, any big things that you think candidates miss in their CVs?
Yeah, I think on the topic of listing responsibilities or achievements, the one thing I'd want to add is to make sure you're quantifying, what each of those responsibilities are. So, for example, using KPIs, percentages, metrics to actually quantify the impact of your achievement, because it's sometimes hard. For example, if you are working on an application where it's a calculator app and it might be like one user at a time, versus like if you work on a large scale web applications with hundreds of thousands of users and it took 12 months to develop that, that's different scale. And then I think being able to communicate that effectively and concisely will really help the recruiters have a better sense of the scale of the work that you did, and also it could be impact from one start date to a future end date, so you can see like that sort of journey of growth.
Yeah, definitely. And I'm gonna keep us on the kind of CV and skills topic. We've got a question that's come up on LinkedIn from Dr. Philippa, who is asking, do we feel that skills are more important than industry experience? As in people who might have a certain skill set, but not necessarily the experience in your industry. How would you weigh that up as someone looking at a CV?
I'm happy to go. Yeah, I think it depends on the role, to be honest. Recruiters will definitely look at skills first to make sure that the relevant skills are there, and then they'll look at the experience afterwards. So, for example, if I'm going to stay on the tech space, so if we're looking for a product designer, we want to make sure that they have the relevant skills in product design, let's say like software as well. And then after that, we'll say, okay, well, let's look at the right level. If it's a senior product designer, it might be 10 plus years experience. Or if it's something more associate or junior level, then we'll look at that as well. But I would say we look at both, but we definitely look at skills first, followed by industry experience.
Interesting. And is there a way that you could lay out your CV differently to really emphasize the skills? Have you seen anyone really nail that, do that really well?
Yeah, you can definitely have a skills section. And for example, on LinkedIn, a lot of the recruiters will do their Boolean searches or search by skills. So make sure that the ones that you want to are proficient in are listed under the skills part, and put it in order of where you feel you're most proficient.
Yeah, that's a great tip that recruiters and hiring managers are using that LinkedIn skills feature to search for candidates. That's amazing. I didn't know that. Chris, was there anything you wanted to add on that?
I was going to follow up on that. So I do believe skills is a great thing to add onto your CV. We have definitely hired, again, I'm going to relate it to engineers, but we've definitely hired engineers with no industry experience. We were looking for, based on their skills and based on kind of what they've put in their CV and what they've done in the past. Picking up on the LinkedIn piece, that was going to be my next part. So as a headhunter, I do the business partner side, and what I do is I go out and I engage the candidates. So as the business partner side, I use LinkedIn heavily. I'm on LinkedIn a lot. And what I will do is I will look for skills. So technically what I'll do is I do a lot of, as I said, mechanical and building services, and I will do a search for mechanical engineers in a certain location. But then what I'll also do is LinkedIn for us recruiters, if you pay extra, but from LinkedIn as recruiters, they give you a chance to input specific skills. So for instance, you could put in their LinkedIn agreed skills, so you will see what they are and what you need to put in. So for instance, I'll look for a mechanical engineer and I can select certain skills, and let me select, say, building services. And what that will do is that will bring my search down from, say, 1,000 to 100, and I can hone in on those 100. So I would 100% say keep your skills on your CV, and definitely look at sprucing up your LinkedIn a bit, because it's definitely used, and the skills part is definitely used as well, if you've had a look at that and you understand what I mean.
Totally. And that's the dream, right? The company comes to us rather than us applying to them. That's every job hunter's dream. So sticking on the kind of LinkedIn topic, something that we've really noticed is becoming more and more of a trend is that people will put in their application through the portal, whether they're using, whatever job site they're using to find that, or whether it's directly through the company. And then they will reach out to the recruiter, the hiring manager, whoever it is, on LinkedIn and send them slide into those DMs and send them a message asking, hi, I've just put my CV in. I'd love to be considered, would like to chat more, whatever the message is. Have you got any tips on this? Like, first of all, is this good? Do you actually like it when people do this? And if you do, what should they be saying?
I'll start with this one. I feel this is contentious. I actually spoke to my colleagues about this recently. I don't mind. I quite like a LinkedIn message. For someone showing interest, or someone saying they've applied, or even someone maybe, I don't think it's wrong chasing up maybe some feedback. And I don't mind it, but I do know other colleagues maybe don't enjoy it as much. The reason being is sometimes I can get about 50 messages on LinkedIn a day, and it's just the way it happens, because from personal experience, because Mott MacDonald is such a massive global company, we do get so much messages. What I would say is, if I agree, I think you should be messaging out to recruiters. We normally, as a company, have the recruiters or the job posters' name on the job advert, not the hiring manager, but we have the recruiter's name on a job advert, and it says feel free to reach out to them. Again, I'm talking from our company. I know that's not always common practice, so I do agree with reaching out to the recruiter on LinkedIn. What I would say though is, again, I think you should be mindful of their time, because they are probably getting a lot, and if it takes them a bit of time to get back to you, it's not them being rude, it's not them not working in the job, it's just sometimes you do have to filter through quite a lot. But definitely what I would try and do is, if you would like, message them, even if you've not applied and you've got questions, message them and have a good opening with kind of why you're messaging and what you're looking for and the particular job. One thing I get a lot of is quite a lot of messages I'll get saying, hi, I'm wondering if you have any jobs. It's stuff like that. It doesn't really get a reply, and kind of that's what my inbox is clogged up with. But if you look at the jobs out there and you see someone's recruiting, I think the best thing to do is, if you want to message them or if you want to speak to them about it further, make sure you pinpoint that specific job you're talking about, or they're the right person to talk to. For instance, if you don't see a specific job and that you're capable of or that you're looking for, make sure they at least deal with those types of jobs in that organisation.
So again, the really actionable bit that people can take away from that is, like, do your research, make sure that you're messaging the right person about the right job, a specific job or a specific type of job, and add some reasoning to your message, not just, hi, I've applied for the job, can you look at my CV? Because you're probably getting hundreds of those a week, if not more, it sounds like. Jeff, want to add your thoughts on the LinkedIn DMs?
Yeah, it is very subjective. So you don't know who the other person is on the other end of your message. And so I guess my general advice is, like, it doesn't hurt to do it as long as you're being polite and respectful of their time. So for example, if you've applied for a role and there's a lot of roles right now where we might get 500 applicants, and if you don't hear from a week, then I think it's okay to give a nudge to whoever posted the job and just say, like, hey, like, I was wondering if this position was still open. And I think if you're just straightforward with your intent and you're not beating around the bush and you're not spamming them, and then I think it's totally fine, because it's sort of just getting a set of eyes and a response. And I think you're entitled to that. And it might work better in some companies than others. For example, if you're reaching out to somebody at a huge company like Google, where they might have a preferred way of, like, going through their candidate channels, that might not work as well then as going to, like, a smaller company where there's only a small team of, like, 5 or 6 talent or recruiters. Probably easier to get a response. And I would say, like, for blind reach outs, usually if there's, like, a connection or some sort of personal connection, mutual connection, that's always helpful to point out, as well as, like, hey, by the way, we both know, Gary from so, yeah, exactly, and just make a connection that way.
Awesome, definitely. So I really want to make sure that we're really tackling that topic of how do you specifically find a flexible or remote job. I'm obviously massively biased and would direct everybody towards Flexa, because then you know that what the companies are saying is true and verified, and you can see exactly what the type of flexibility they're offering is, because it comes in all forms. You've got fully remote all the way through to 1 day a week at home and everything in between, time flexibility, work from anywhere schemes, enhanced parental leave, all of these things. So there's a lot of complexity around flexible working. It isn't just flexible or not flexible. There's a lot more to it. So what would your advice be when people are, they know they want a flexible job, but maybe they don't know where to start looking? You don't have to tell them to go to Flexa. I've already done that. But what kind of questions should they be asking companies or looking for on kind of careers pages, that kind of thing?
Go to Flexa. So I have noticed that there is a trend though now when you look at jobs, specifically on LinkedIn, because we use LinkedIn a lot, so I'm going to look at that. A lot of the jobs will now specify whether they're remote, whether they're hybrid. Most jobs are hybrid now, which is always a work from home and office arrangement. If you are looking for a flexible job, I believe what we do, again, I feel like I'm just always personally talking about what we do, but as a company, what we do is we have that discussion up front. We have lots of flexible working arrangements. We've got lots of people with children that have to work flexibly, that start late, that finish early, and it's always a discussion up front. So I would say, first of all, use these methods like Flexa, like LinkedIn, that tell you specific information, because I know Flexa tells you stuff on their website, such as 2 days working in the office, flexible working. LinkedIn kind of does similar, so I would definitely have a look through that, have a look through the company policy. But when push comes to shove, if you're applying for a job, there's nothing wrong with, during the application process, asking what their flexible working policy is, because it's a major part of companies now. It definitely is.
I'd love to talk a bit more about that, because I think that a lot of people are nervous about saying, I want a flexible job, to a recruiter or a headhunter or a hiring manager, because they don't want that to come across as, that that's the only thing they're looking for, or that that's the only reason they're applying to the company. What is the best way to have those kind of conversations? Or if someone asks those questions, what do you think about them? Or is it's all totally fine?
So from my end, I think it's okay to ask like questions that will give you the answer, that aren't just like, I want a flexible job. For example, like, what are the values of the company? Especially like, the culture of the company, because a lot of it comes from the top. So if you have leadership that's supportive of outcome-based or results-based performance, then they're probably less likely to say you have to work this many hours, as long as you're delivering on the job, right? You can ask about like, you can look at Glassdoor. You can look, speak to people that have worked at the company in the past, or are currently working at the company as well. But I would say, like, for our recruiting team, like, we're also we would prefer to have that conversation early on in the process, just to make sure that we're not wasting anyone's time. Because like, if your expectation of flexible doesn't mesh with ours, then we probably will shake hands and like, it's probably not going to work out. But at the end of the day, like, kind of what Chris is saying, like, most companies are sort of like moving towards some sort of flexible work, and so I think it's actually we get these questions a lot, and we make sure to really iron out like what are the preferences, like how far they're commuting, like and stuff like that, before we even proceed to the next stage of the process.
Yeah, it's really interesting, and there's a really relevant question. Again, I'm really sorry I can't see your name. It just says LinkedIn user. Someone has said, should I mention that I'm disabled on my CV or cover letter? I don't at the moment. And we had another question earlier on in the chat that was around, I need a flexible job because I'm disabled. What do we think about that? Like, at what point do you expect or want candidates to disclose a disability in the process? And I think, a bit of reassurance that is totally fine. That, like, most companies now are very accommodating of these things, but I think it's good to have that reassurance straight from the people who are doing the hiring.
Yeah. There you go, Jeff.
Yeah, I was going to say I think it's up to the individual, but I would say definitely bring it up during your initial call with the recruiter, because then most companies will have their reasonable accommodations to make sure that we can accommodate for the disability through the interview process. So if you want to put it on the resume, that's fine. If not, just make sure you bring it up with the first call.
I agree with Jeff. I've not seen it much on CVs or resumes, but we, as part of our application process, we do include it as part of the application process, and I do believe it's good to bring up to the recruiter. As you say, Beth, companies now know about it. They have reasonable adjustments. They accommodate it. So I definitely wouldn't bring yourself out of a recruitment process because of it, because the companies are just losing good talent if you do. To be honest, I wouldn't bring myself out of something just because of that. They definitely should be accommodating, and most companies you find will be, whether you bring it up to begin with at the start or not. A lot of companies will be more than accommodating to it. Yeah,
I think you put it so well there. Companies that aren't willing to make adjustments or accommodations are losing out on great talent, from all kinds of backgrounds, with all different disabilities and conditions, whoever they are. You're absolutely right. And so what kind of accommodations could you make in a process? We've got another question here that's around neurodiversity. If you find it very difficult to put in an application or to, go through the process, what kind of things are reasonable to ask for as a candidate, or that you would offer as businesses?
As a business, we are very forthcoming in that. Neurodiversity, we do ask the question at the start of our application process. What we will do is we'll accommodate certain things. So if you need longer to complete an application, certain ways to interview, for instance, we offer different types of interviews. If someone doesn't like being on camera due to neurodiversity, we will offer them to come into the office. We offer quite a number of different ways. What we will actually do is, if you say you are neurodiverse or you have any adjustments required, we take your adjustments on board. You tell us what you want, and we accommodate it in the interview process. And then once you make your way through, HR is then informed, and they accommodate it throughout your full time with us. So again, I feel like I'm saying that from a personal company response. I know not all companies will do it, but they should.
Totally.
Yeah, for us, I can use an example for engineering. We send out candidate packs, so candidates can see stage by stage what they can expect in each stage of the process, what the focus area is going to be, how they can prepare. And so if someone requests an adjustment, we can be accommodating. For example, they're uncomfortable using or solving a problem on a whiteboard, then maybe we will do a pair programming instead, because obviously we want candidates to succeed and for them to show their best selves. And a lot of times, like when you're interviewing, like engineers, for example, they don't like sit in a conference room and have to like code for 60 minutes optimized solution. They probably have like YouTube up, playing music and eating popcorn, whatever. And so it's a very strange sort of environment to be in already. And so we try to make it as comfortable as possible. And so we can make the adjustments depending on but that's why it's really helpful to have those conversations with people ahead of time.
Yeah. I love what you said there around, we want candidates to succeed. And I think, anyone who is feeling nervous about going into these processes and speaking to recruiters and feeling like, oh, they're just trying to trip me up at every turn, I really hope that reassures you that this is absolutely not the case. The recruiters, the people hiring you, want you to have show off the best version of yourselves, and everything they're doing is there to try and remove any blockers that might be in the way so that you can do that. That's really helpful. Thank you.
Can I just follow on from that?
Yeah.
What I would say is, I've been in recruitment for 8 years. Obviously, in the grand scheme of things, it's not a massive time. However, I've seen such a shift in these types of processes in just 8 years. And as a recruiter myself, it's my job to find the best talent. Whatever that talent is, it's my job to find the best talent. So I would never be put off by any sort of neurodiversity or anything at all in applying for a job.
Yeah. I think times have really changed, right? It's definitely, things are changing all the time. There's a really great question here from Miriam, who has said, I'm a parent and I've been self-employed for 3 years. I'm looking for a flexible role, but I find that obtaining a referee is difficult. I'm worried that being self-employed is off-putting to recruiters. How could I explain this on my CV? What advice can we share?
I've had experience with this. So, as I said, again, being an engineer, we do get a lot of self-employed people that decide they want to become permanent staff members. The best way, I would say, in the most simple way, is either, if there's a cover letter, include in your cover letter the fact, I understand I've been a contractor, this is my reasons for wanting to be a permanent staff. Explain your kind of background, explain what it is you're looking for now in a role, or add it into your CV. We've had so many times where, I said, there's been an engineer I've had been on site contracting just because of their kind of life for 10 years, and they'll come to us and say, look, I've done my stint in contracting, I'd like to be permanent, I'd like to be settled down, and that's taken into consideration. And I feel like it's one of the more simple things to do, just to include it in your application, and a recruiter would see it.
Yeah, it was actually a journey I did myself. I was a contractor for self-employed for about 8 years. And when I decided to go in-house, I think that it was quite a daunting thing, because you kind of think, oh gosh, like, they're going to think that I can't work with a team, and they might think that, I don't understand how to work inside an organization or how all the processes work. But there are so many transferable skills. You're going into new businesses all the time and having to figure out how teams work and how to get the best out of new organizational structures. So I definitely don't let it put you off. I think it's if the change feels right to you, then it's definitely not a no, it sounds like. Jeff, any advice on explaining the self-employed or even a career gap? Maybe there's a lot of people who've had, from whether it's redundancies or through choice, have got a career gap. How should we be handling that?
Yeah, look, if you've made it through an interview process, it's unlikely that the lack of a referee is going to tank the offer. What we've done in the past for some self-employed candidates, you can provide character references as well. That's helpful too. But I wouldn't sort of like see that as a major blocker. Definitely, like if you do well in the interview and it's a good fit, I think there's definitely ways to get around it.
Yeah, awesome. And we've got a question from Eva on LinkedIn here, which is around the kind of brevity and length of a CV. So she's asking, is it worth keeping my CV to 1 page if it sacrifices detail, particularly if I remove more junior and main skills that are transferable rather than direct? What do you think about length of CV and removing some of your old experiences?
I prefer a 2-page CV. I've had CVs that are 18 pages long, which include pictures, which include all sorts of fonts, etc. I do prefer a 1 to 2 page CV. I would maybe not take away some skills, but the answer to this question would be I would tailor it to the type of role you're applying for. So, for instance, if you're applying for a senior management role, you probably don't need that assistant junior role at the bottom. You would just include what it is you've done, kind of your skills, and at the bottom maybe have a footnote of your previous, rather than having every job responsibility that you've had previously. And I would say definitely, again, looking from a recruiter's point of view, because you look at that much CVs, a 2-page or 1 to 2 page is what I would recommend, unless there's a reason for it to be longer. But I would say 1 to 2 page, but I wouldn't sacrifice the general content or, again, that blend within the job description that you're applying for and the CV itself.
I don't think people look at pages anymore. Everything is pageless now. When we look at usually the version of the resume we get will be either a PDF, so it's just infinite scroll, or there's just no pages. So my advice would be, if you have something in there where you don't even remember like doing that, you probably don't need it on there. So don't sacrifice, like, if you feel like something is relevant, keep it in there. Don't take it out just because you're trying to keep it under a page.
Yeah. So if you couldn't confidently tell a story or give an anecdote or an example from that role, take it out. It's been too long.
We don't need it.
Yeah, we don't need it. Yeah, something that you can follow up on and really dig into. We've only got 5 minutes left, so I'd really like to. We've got a great question in the chat, which is around how flexible working is often really dictated by management style within the teams and within the company. Are we at a point where candidates can ask about management style within the interview process, or how would that go down? Is it a good question?
Oh yes, this is for me. Okay. Yes, definitely. I mean, this should, in a standard interview process, I would expect candidates ask, what is your management style, especially if you're interviewing with your potential manager. And as an interviewer, I've been asked that question many times, and I think it's definitely something I expect to be asked, and it'll give you a good reflection of like how you might be managed. Like I'm definitely not a micromanager, and so I set expectations. We'll go over, numbers on a weekly basis. If you hit your numbers in 3 days, I don't care what hours you work, how many hours you work. Like as long as you hit your numbers, that's great. So don't be afraid to ask that question. You should definitely, if you have a list of questions that you're asking an employer or to the person interviewing, that should definitely be one of them. And I think probably one of the most popular ones.
Yeah, it's a good one to be on there. Yeah. And I love what you're saying about that kind of output-led flexibility. As long as the work gets done, we don't really mind how exactly that happens. So the final question before we wrap stuff up, this is actually from over on Instagram. Is there a way that if you are, whether you're a seasoned flexible worker or whether you're kind of brand new to flexible working or remote working in whatever form that is do you look on CVs for an indication that someone is capable of working flexibly? And if you do, what are the kind of things that you're looking for to know that they'll be successful in the environment that you've got?
Oh, no, I disagree with that question. I think that as a recruiter, and as most recruiters should do, it's a skills-based job. So what I look at is if someone's capable, whether that be in the office or at home, whether they have flexible working, whether they need to leave early to pick up a child from school. It is, in my mind, it's totally skills and experience based. I do not subscribe to whether someone would be capable of working at home or flexibly or in the office. I do generally think it comes down to the individual and what they bring to the team, regardless of where they're working from.
Yeah.
In a nutshell.
Interesting. Jeff, do you see people trying to explain their sort of flexible working abilities, or what do you think about it?
No, it might come up when you talk about like what arrangements you've worked in. So for example, internet connection in a workspace where you can focus and concentrate. That's actually something that we ask of employees, especially if you're going to be working from home, a place where you can actually focus and do your work. But the other things, like we provide training, we also set expectations on performance. And so those things, look, remote working is just like anything else. It requires discipline, it requires reps. And so, if you've done it before, like great, but it's also something that can be learned. It's like, when you're in school, you're in grade school, you're like in class every day, I don't know, 8 o'clock, 8 to 3. When you're in university, nobody really takes your attendance, right? And so you kind of have to build that discipline yourself. It's kind of the same with flexible work. Like, you got to start somewhere. We don't screen out just because somebody hasn't done it before, but we just make sure, like, in the interview process, like, we set the expectations of, look, if you want to work in this environment, in order for you to be successful, you need to be organized, you need to over communicate, you need to be accountable, and if you're taking work off one day, that you make it up on in your own time, right? So I think as long as you're upfront and transparent with those expectations, and also you yourself, like, saying, okay, I've done the research, I know I can do this, and this is what I want to do. I think, yeah, there shouldn't be a blocker just because you haven't done it before.
Amazing. Well, I really thank you so much, Jeff, Chris. It's been amazing. I think I've definitely learned a lot, and it's so reassuring to hear all of these great things straight from the people who could be hiring you. So if anyone wants to find out more about Motorway or Mott MacDonald, you can find their Flexa profiles. And if you've got any more questions anywhere, follow us on LinkedIn or on Instagram, and we're often in the DMs or in the comments answering people's questions. So definitely throw more questions our way if you've got them. But yeah, thank you everybody, and hopefully see you at the next webinar. Thanks. Bye.